What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another Pro Guides Wild Rift video. I'm Kangas, and today we got our patch 2.3 tier list for champions up to Platinum 1 Elo. The top tier champions in this list have been dominating average levels of play, while the bottom tier champions lack the power to stand out in the current meta. We also have a separate list covering the higher levels of play, so be on the lookout for that. To start us off though, we got our question of the day. Which champion do you wish had more prevalence in the current meta? Personally, I wish Soraka had a more reliable kit and could survive against all the assassins like Akali and Rengar, but let me know yours in the comments below, and let's get into the video. To start us off in the Baron lane, we have Garen in the overpowered picks. He's been an absolute monster in every elo bracket thanks to his absurd tankiness and incredibly high base damage. And now with the release of the regeneration rune, the Demacian is sure to further annoy his lane opponents with his fantastic sustain. Comboed with his passive, Garen's health regeneration is no joke, allowing him to jump right back into the fray and slice down the enemy. And despite the small nerfs that he received in patch 2.3 to his base stats, the Garen pick will most definitely remain prominent, especially in the average levels of play. Oh, and before we continue, if you haven't yet, check out our video covering the entirety of the patch 2.3 update. A lot of changes were introduced, and many of the buffs and nerfs will be referenced throughout this video. So if you want to follow along, make sure you've seen that one first. And the next champion up is Renekton, and to be honest, we kinda overestimated his speculated strength in the last patch, since he ended up releasing in a bit of a sorry state. Before patch 2.3, he was around a B tier at best, but with the buffs that he just received to his first ability, Call the Meek, he jumped up to a solid A tier pick for the average levels of play. The on-hit heals were increased drastically, scaling much better with AD. This is a fantastic buff since the Gator can now heal more effectively to survive those dire teamfights, which also makes the skill much more rewarding to hit, allowing Renekton to play as how he was originally designed. And the last picks for the Baron lane are Riven and Irelia, both speculated to be A-tier picks in the low elo. Both champions are very skill reliant, utilizing dashes and mechanical prowess to reign victorious. Irelia's kit relies on keeping track of her stacks in order to dash to as many targets as possible, maximizing her damage output, while Riven's kit relies heavily on creating intricate combos while also weaving in auto attacks. It's very hard to tell exactly how strong they will be on release since no exact damage numbers have been released during the initial production of this video. In addition, these two champions are famous on League PC for having an incredibly high skill cap, so it'll definitely take some time for players to just grow accustomed to their kits. But one thing we know for sure is these champions are very welcome additions to Wild Rift, and if they do release in weak states, Riot will absolutely buff them in the next couple of patches. So here are all the Baron lane picks. And before we move on to the other lanes, we just want to say thank you for being a part of our Pro Guides community. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, each and every one of you viewers has helped us shape the channel into what it is today, and input and feedback are always appreciated. So for those looking to find more ways to get involved, you can always join our Wild Rift Discord and let us know your thoughts in there. Moving on to the jungle, our first pick is Evelynn, still in the S tier. Although she was nerfed twice in a row, her base mechanics has remained unchanged, so abuse her constant invisibility to just take control of the map. And now it takes a tad more work to scale into the game, but once she has her two items, her core playstyle remains unchanged. Burst down the unsuspecting enemies and escape using her ultimate. But since she deals less burst damage overall, since the nerfs to her first ability, Hate Spike, chunked a substantial amount of DPS, she's definitely not as overpowered as she once was, but she's still really good. And next up in the jungle is Xin Zhao in the A tier. The spear wielder of Demacia received pretty big changes in patch 2.3, decreasing his overall damage but drastically increasing his utility. Players should find an easier time engaging with Xin Zhao thanks to his increased range of the Audacious Charge. Once he closes in the gap, he can throw out his ultimate, Crescent Guard, to shield himself from damage outside of the circle. Since the duration of his ultimate, alongside the distance Xin Zhao can dash, were both increased, players should find a much easier time executing his key abilities to change the tides of a team fight. And Rammus is the last pick, having dropped down to the B tier for this list since patch 2.3 actually nerfed the Armadillo's base armor growth. In addition, the base damage reflected by defensive ball was decreased by 6 at its maximum upgrade, meaning Rammus will not only be less tanky, but also deal less damage during the late game. Rammus's greatest strength is becoming a tanky monster in the late game that deals insane damage just by existing. So these changes definitely hit his core gameplay, resulting in an overall decrease in the Armadillo's pick priority. And here are all the jungle picks. Next up, moving to the mid lane, starting with Diana, she's now in our S tier picks, having dropped down from the overpowered tier. This is largely due to the massive nerfs from patch 2.3 affecting her ultimate damage, passive scaling, and base stats. With 40 health shaved off of her base health, Diana's early engages will definitely not be as safe as they once were. The passive AP ratio means less damage overall, so her lane opponents will once again have a chance to contest the laning phase, potentially outraining the Moonlight wielding mage. In addition, the damage shaved off of her ultimate definitely hurts the pick priority, giving her less opportunity to 100-0 the entire enemy team. Second pickup is Orianna, now in the A tier. She's definitely going to see more and more play thanks to the addition of the rune Phase Rush. This rune allows her to zoom around to kite her enemies more effectively, positioning to maximize her damage and also hit those wombo combo ults. Though none of her core items or build paths were buffed, expect to see more players trying out Orianna just to try out Phase Rush on a champion that has been renowned for abusing the rune on the PC version. And the final pick for mid lane is Annie, also in the A tier for this list. She's been a pretty strong pick in the low elo since her kit is just really straightforward. Use your abilities to get to your stun, and then use your stun on as many champions as possible. Typically, this will be in the form of Tippers or Incinerate. In essence, just use her area of effect skills when proccing your stun during teamfights to absolutely decimate the enemy team. Although Annie isn't the strongest pick in lane, her area of effect stun more than makes up for her weak early game. And with Tippers to body block, she's an excellent teamfighting champion in the average levels of play. So here's the full mid lane tier list. Moving on to the AD carries, once again, Jinx is in the overpowered tier list. Anyone surprised? She's a phenomenal strong champion when players don't capitalize on her weakness, which is her fragility and lack of escapes. Her auto attack damage with both her minigun and rocket launcher rewards constant spamming. Minigun becomes faster and faster, and rocket launchers just deal a buttload of area of effect damage. Either way, Jinx's autos shred through her enemies, and thanks to her passive Get Excited, all it takes is one mistake for Jinx to capitalize on in order to absolutely snowball the entire fight. She is truly the ultimate pub stomping machine. And the second AD carry is Tristana in the A tier. She's been seen more and more play, but still isn't quite the staple pick. When she acquires a lead, jumping in and bursting down your enemy laners is very satisfying, allowing her to snowball the game incredibly hard. Her engage provides fantastic burst damage, but the issue with Tristana is that her kit relies on fully committing to that engage. She is the epitome of high risk, high reward for AD carry champions. The moment she jumps in, unless she instantly destroys the enemy, Tristana is a sitting duck all out of hops. In the early game, her consistent DPS is definitely lacking, with the majority of her damage relying on her explosive charge and ultimate ability Buster Shot. With these on cooldown, chances are she won't deal as much damage in the fight compared to her counterparts. But a champion that's definitely been feeling the brunt of the blows in 2.3 is Ashe, now sitting all the way down in the C tier picks. She's in a really poor state, lacking the consistent damage output and skill utility to grant her a solid place in the meta. Her ultimate, Enchanted Crystal Arrow, is without a doubt the strongest tool of her kit because it just shoots out a global skill shot that stuns. But beside this one ability, the rest of her kit is kinda lackluster. Ashe's auto attacks don't deal enough damage, and her volley is on too long of a cooldown to effectively impact a teamfight. The skill essentially just tickles the enemy's front line, and chances are you're better off picking another AD carry besides Ashe on patch 2.3. So here's the full AD carry tier list. And last but definitely not least, where are all my support mains at? Lulu's up first, and she is in the A tier picks, and is honestly still in a pretty solid position. Though she doesn't offer the conventional heals, her abilities excel at denying the enemy while increasing the efficiency of her allies' plays. Every one of her abilities can be used in harmony with her allies, synergizing perfectly with many of the top tier champions such as Jinx and Kai'Sa. In addition, her ultimate Wild Growth applies a knock-up to all the enemies surrounding her target. This makes the skill perfect for peeling for a carry or even extending the effects of her allies' crowd control. Take, for example, Malphite ults into the enemy team, knocking up 5 enemies. Simply use Lulu's ultimate on the Malphite for an additional knockup onto all 5, making for one of the easiest methods of creating wombo combos in the entire game. And next up we have Sona in the A tier. She's a very easy champion to play with only a single skill shot in her entire kit. With a speed buff, an attack boost, and a heal, she's one of the most conventional healing supports in the game, making Sona a great team player. She excels at keeping the team alive while also granting them extra utility with every move that they make. Her ultimate Crescendo throws out a musical chord, stunning all enemies hit. A properly used ultimate can drastically change the tides of a team fight. She's overall a great support, but the biggest issue with Sona is her fragility. She's incredibly vulnerable to crowd control since she's got no dashes to escape. When playing the musician, make sure to always stay in a really safe spot while also considering your allies' next moves. And last pick for the day is the Rolling Golem Blitzcrank, finally out of C tier and into the B tier. Patch 2.3 increased his overall utility by decreasing his passive shield cooldown, allowing Blitzcrank to play boldly more often. This is actually huge, since Blitzcrank players need to play bold in order to properly impact the game. After all, aggressive hooks are what make the champion viable, and with a bit more insurance to rely on, Blitzcrank players can now more frequently position for those high-risk, high-reward plays. So here's all the supports. And with that, that'll conclude today's video. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to like the video and sub to the channel for everything Wild Rift. Don't forget to answer the question of the day in the comments down below. And until next time, everybody, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.